All right. Good morning, America. Oh, are you okay? Good morning, America. Uh, good morning, Earth. I have friends from all over. I have friends from let's see. I don't know, maybe like Switzerland or Norway, from Colombia, South Korea, Canada. Wow, yeah, friends and acquaintances from all over the place that I've met over the years. I even have one friend in Pakistan and another friend and acquaintance in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, so welcome to my live stream. Today I wanted to talk to you just a little bit. Maybe this will be a short video. Maybe it'll be long if I get going, but um, so today I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but from um starting in December 2018, I started teaching for Landy English, and so far the experience has been pretty good. Um, uh, I've been teaching English for now over 7 years. Um, something like yeah, something like not 7.5 years, but we'll get there in a few months. And so one of the things that I've learned is like one of the things that's really important in teaching and just in dealing with people is how to relate to people in a way that gets you what you want. And so there are two ways that people think of to get what they want. I mean, and there are many ways, but I'll classify these in two ways. One way is positive interactions, and one way is negative interactions. So negative interactions would be like criticism, nagging, complaining, manipulation, passive aggressiveness. Like these are different negative tactics or strategies that people use to get what they want, and I've used all of them. I've used all of them as a teacher, as a friend, as a family member. I mean, I remember the first time I attempted to manipulate my dad, I was probably 9 years old, or even younger. And so yeah, so those are some negative ways. And then I would say that there's another class called positive ways. And so most of my life I've been a little bit on the positive side, but I've mostly been on the negative side. But then over the last few years, especially being a teacher, and it's important to me to be a good teacher and to be a world-class teacher, and so I just want to do the best I can. If I think I can do a good job, then I want to do a good job, and I don't want to just babysit students, or I don't want to be a boring teacher. I want to be an effective lecturer, teacher, and I want my classes to be fun and entertaining. And so I've been on this pursuit now for over 7 years, and so I've learned a few ways I've learned more recently about using the positive kinds of feedback. And so one way is through affirmation or celebration. And to be honest, I haven't used this very much at all until now. When I was teaching children in South Korea, where I taught for 3.5 years, and I taught many hours there, and then when I was teaching in China, in both places, even though I wanted my classes to be fun, I wanted them to be exciting and not boring. I primarily used negative feedback. And so I would constantly point out the mistakes that students made. And in China, I noticed especially, and I'm sure it did the same thing in Korea, it just discouraged my students. And I was fun enough with the children in South Korea that they would continue to participate, but I still wasn't very good at giving targeted, specific, timely, positive feedback. And so, uh, so yeah, and that's and that's because in my own life, I've up until some years ago, or not even years ago, up until uh, up until about a year ago, maybe or less, I was pretty shame and fear based, and that's something that God's been helping me with, and my therapist has been helping me with, and I've already talked to you about uh, how to deal with shame, and that's an ongoing thing for me, and um, which I addressed in my video. Shame hates the light, and or something to that effect. And so, but anyways, as I've learned to forgive myself for past mistakes or failures, and I've let go of the shame of those events um, through Jesus' help, and um, then I've gotten to know myself better, and I've gotten to know, and because of the affirmation of my therapist, um, and the books I've read that have talked to me about healthy relationships, uh, and and also just catching like learning from studies, like not firsthand but secondhand, learning from studies that say that positive affirmation is far more effective in modifying behavior than negative feedback is. Now, negative feedback is necessary at times, but what we've learned in human interaction is that it takes 7 instances of positive feedback before a person can give 1 instance of negative feedback. And so, for instance, today I corrected a student in their pronunciation, I think, of a word. No, it was a sentence, because they were saying the sentence I was trying to teach them was this is water, and he was saying this is a water, or this is, or something like that. And anyways, he was adding a, and I said buldui, which in Chinese means that's not correct. It's this is water. And but I could do that because what I'm getting at is that I've changed so much in the way I give feedback to students. So now I don't give a lot of negative feedback. I give 90 to 100% positive feedback. And so it's been fascinating because, like, when I was in China, I remember giving a lot of negative feedback, and I mean, when I gave the negative feedback, I felt bad. I mean, it just I could like I didn't feel good, and so it I'm assuming that consequently my students didn't feel good, and I could measure that in my students' test scores. In the beginning, their test scores would be good, but by the end, their test scores would be not so good. And that was my fault because I was given a lot of negative feedback and very little encouragement. But now what I do is I try to celebrate every single time my students have a victory, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it is. Like, something I've learned, like for critical minds or perfectionists, the fundamental drive of perfectionism is not enough. It's not good enough. I'm not good enough, or something I'm doing is not good enough, and which is a terrible way to live because there's no such thing as perfection on this side of eternity, or at least not in the way that people think. And so, anyways, so now with my students, I give positive affirmations. So if they have a little victory, like for instance, like I even give affirmations in circumstances where before I wouldn't have. For instance, when I was in China, if a student was late, I would try to embarrass them by singing loudly to them, um, or maybe I'd like take it personally and be kind of upset or really upset, or like I just wouldn't respond. I would respond negatively, and and um, not all the time, but probably most of the time. Well, maybe all the time, and so that wasn't good. And so since encouragement or celebration or affirmation works, and is many times more powerful than criticism or nagging or complaining, or manipulation or whatever. Now what I do is like, okay, so like if like today, I think one of my students was late to a class, and instead of saying like, why were you late, or criticizing her or giving her a hard time, I I thanked her and welcomed her for coming. And so so I use this with all my students now. I affirm the things I want them to keep doing and do more of, and I stay focused on that. And that's really interesting in the light of a book I'm reading now, or that I'm reading for a second time, called The Secret. And The Secret is a book, kind of a compilation of many lectures, like many lectures about the law of attraction. And so the law of attraction says, in effect, you attract what you are, or like attracts like. And so I guess if I was going to apply the law of attraction to my teaching, then when I was pointing out students' mistakes, essentially I was saying, even though I would have said with my mouth, I don't want more mistakes, but essentially to my students, metaphysically or spiritually or psychically, I was saying, I want more mistakes. And so they gave me more mistakes. And more or less, not all the time. Some students changed, but most of them didn't respond very well. And so like I said, the law of attraction says like attracts like. So when I'm criticizing students or I'm pointing out their mistakes, I'm saying, because I'm giving that attention, then that's what I'm going to create. I'm going to attract more mistakes from my students. And now that I'm working with the law of attraction in a different way, I'm directing my attention, because other people have taught me, don't focus on what you don't want, focus on what you do want. And so now I try to focus on what I want, and I try to pay attention to what I want, because everybody needs attention. And if they can't get good attention, they'll try to get bad attention. And that's not what I want. What I want is I want to give attention to good things. And so I try to ignore the things my students do that I don't like, and I try to pay attention to the things I do like. And why is that? Because if I am affirming and encouraging my personal victories on a daily basis, if I'm practicing that, if I'm encouraging myself, or as I may have said in a past video, if I'm self-parenting or having self-compassion, or put another way, practicing self-love, or being kind to myself, the core of that message there's two parts to that message. Towards myself when I encourage myself, and towards others when I encourage or affirm others or my students. So the first part of that is to be. And the to be message of self-love and loving others and encouraging others is I am good enough. And the message to others is you are good enough. And this is true for everyone, no matter what. The irony is that the belief creates the feelings. So when I believe I'm good enough, then in part or in whole, it shuts off feelings of worthlessness and shame, and it starts to produce feelings after its own kind, after its own negative, or like the law of attraction says, like attracts like. So if I believe I'm good enough, then I start to feel that I'm good enough. And if I feel I'm not good enough, then I experience feelings of shame or worthlessness or guilt. And so what I try to do, and I don't always succeed at this, but I try to stay focused on what I do want. I don't try to avoid what I don't want, because if I'm trying to avoid what I don't want, then I'm still paying attention to it, which means I'm still giving it energy to it, which means in essence, on an energy level, I'm still saying, I want this bad thing. Like, if I have a child who's misbehaving and I start to pay attention to their misbehavior and chastise them for it or criticize them for it, essentially what I'm saying on an energy level, even though my words say stop that, really what the meaning of my words and my energy are saying is keep doing that bad behavior, because that's what I'm giving you attention for. And if you need attention, and the only way you can get attention is by misbehaving, the only way you can get your need for attention met is by misbehaving, because I don't pay attention to the good things you do. I only pay attention to the bad things you do, or to the things I don't like. Then what are you going to do? You're going to be motivated to do the things you're getting attention from. And so again, what I try to do is I try to pay attention to the things I want students to keep doing. And I have to be careful about this, because sometimes my students misbehave in class, but it's really funny, and I laugh, and I can tell that, like, by paying attention to and laughing these funny antics of my students, that they'll do it more if I laugh at it. So and I love a good joke. So, but I have to be careful, because even laughing at an inappropriate behavior relative to the context of the classroom can affirm that behavior, because I'm giving attention to it. And so now what I'm learning to do is, by affirming, going back to the point I was making, to be and then to do. So when I affirm students, I'm affirming two sides. One part is you are good enough. And so that's like when my students come to class, I'm saying, hey, you're here. Good job. I don't say hey, you're 5 minutes late. I say, hey, you're here. Good job. And that encourages them, that gives them the attention for coming on time, which is what I want. I want more of the attendance behavior, more of the on-time behavior. And so there's the to be, and then there's the to do. And so I work with the to do in two ways, for the most part. One way is nice try. Another way is good job. And so nice try means it's an affirmation of the effort, but it's saying you didn't get it right, but I'm affirming that you tried. And because why should a student keep trying if I'm not going to encourage them to keep trying? right? If their need is for attention and I don't give them attention if they try in a good way, then why should they keep doing it? I'm not meeting their need. So the first one is to try. So nice try, good try. Wow, good try. I can recall many times me and maybe some friends or family, a friend or family members were golfing, and one of the guys will hit a nice putt, and maybe it's like a 20-foot putt or a 10-foot putt or something, and they get really close. They don't get it, but they get really close. That's a perfect opportunity to say, "Hey, good shot, good try. You almost got it. Wow, you're really close." Like, and that's an encouragement to keep going. Because who wants to keep doing something that they're not getting encouraged for? From if they're not encouraging themselves or if they're not encouraging others, why would they want to keep doing it? And I'll tell you why, because a lot of people are fear and shame driven. So a lot of people are motivated not by what they want, but they're motivated by what they're afraid will happen, which ironically, investing your attention in the vision, investing your time and energy into actions while being focused on that image in your mind or that movie in your mind of what you're afraid will happen will actually cause what you're afraid of happening to happen, because that's what you're focused on. Like attracts like. And so first I say nice try if the students try or if they attempt, and then that affirms, then that encourages them, because I'm not punishing them, I am encouraging them. I'm saying, hey, you're good enough and your attempt was good enough. So I'm trying to point out what is good enough so that they will feel encouraged, they'll feel better about themselves. So first it's the to be, you're good enough, and then second is the to do, nice try or good job. When I say good job, I'm saying what you did was good enough. You measured up to the standard. So if my student, if I'm teaching a student, like for instance today, like I said, I needed to teach the students the sentence, this is water. So they needed to be able to say that, or at least repeat it. This is water. And some students would make the mistake of saying, this is a water. And I didn't just, for the most part, except for one instance, I didn't point out I didn't say like bad job for saying that. I would simply move into correction. Oh, good try. This is water. This is water. And if a student would say it wrong again, I'd say, oh my gosh, this, well, actually I didn't say that today, but it might be a nice thing to say. This is water. This is water. This is water. Water. Right? And so if a student does say the words one at a time, and then in a sentence, this is water, water, or this is water, this is water. If my students do any of those actions successfully, I try to congratulate them for it. Well done, or in Chinese, 非常好, very good. And so what that does is it fills their hearts, or like it hits the bullseye of their soul with good energy. It hits the bullseye of their soul with good energy. It hits the bullseye of who they are with messages and feelings. Because I cannot project a feeling. I mean, there are ways to do it, but it's not genuine. But it's difficult or impossible for me to give somebody else a feeling that I'm not already feeling. So if I am not encouraging myself, and if I don't feel encouraged, or if I'm not getting encouragement from God to do, to be who I am and to do what I do, then how can I give that to them? And how can I encourage a student for trying to do a good job, even though they didn't reach the objective, but they still attempted it and they got some of the way there. I mean, even an attempt is good because an attempt is risk. And when people risk, they're vulnerable. And when they're vulnerable, they're scared of being criticized for it. They're scared of being shamed of it. At least the older people get, they tend to become that way, unless they're raised in a healthy family that interacts with the children or interacts with each other in a family dynamic that I'm talking about. That's not shame-based or fear-based or pride-based or perfectionism-based or you're not good enough or guilt-based, but rather affirmation and you're good enough and who you are is good enough. So I wanted to talk about that today because changing to this way of teaching. Now I teach, in the beginning I taught about, I think 16 or 16 and a half hours a week from starting in mid-December 2018. Now I'm teaching 17 hours a week. And so I've like in the beginning, this affirming what I want more of from the students was an experiment. I knew from my assessment numbers from university time that what I was doing was not working. Some students would really like me because some students really wanted the negative feedback, and some negative feedback can be good. It can even be really good in a circumstance where a student is divorced from reality. So a good example of feedback in a negative situation that can be good is when somebody or people are divorced from the reality of the harm they're causing through their actions. And so, for instance, in my classes, sometimes I'd have a student come in who was good at English, but because they were relatively good, they were good at English relative to their other classmates. Sometimes they might think that they didn't really need to study or that they kind of thought they had it down. And so I knew I needed to show those students, I needed to put them in a situation and expose them to the insufficiency of their own English skills so that they would sense, oh, I have, so I could crack their pride in half and just shatter that and to humble them and to get them in a position where they're willing to learn. And so, yeah. And so sometimes I would do that. If a student would come in and I could tell that they thought they didn't have anything to learn, or it was going to be difficult to teach them because their ego was so big, then I would make sure to choose them or get them in an activity where they're in front of the class and put them under the time pressure to perform and then give them the feedback of how many mistakes they made. And even the best students in an English class would make many mistakes. And actually counting those mistakes and even having the class count the mistakes and give feedback helps wake students up to their need to, oh, I have something to learn. But that's in the situation where a student is divorced from reality. So they think they're better than they are. So they need to know where they are. They need to be brought down to earth and to be brought back into contact with reality. So this is a kind of situation where critical feedback can be a good thing. So another good example of this is if you've ever watched Hell's Kitchen or Hotel Hell with Gordon Ramsay, two shows that I super like and have binged, at least clips and entire episodes of some of them. a lot of times the first thing that Gordon has to do, and it makes him look like an asshole, but the first thing he does is he goes in to a restaurant and he orders their food, and this is the place that is a restaurant or a hotel that is asked for help. And so they bring out the food, he'll taste it. Typically it's garbage because that's why the restaurant's failing. And so then Gordon goes into the kitchen to say, hey, like he gives the cook feedback, and the feedback is typically like, yeah, this is crap. And then he'll go into the kitchen and he'll start to investigate in the kitchen and find, and so typically in this kind of situation, there's rotten food in the fridge. Like the kitchen's dirty or there's bugs. So basically the integrity or the purity of the kitchen has been defiled or contaminated. And then, like, pissed as hell, Gordon will go to the chef or the owners or both, the people responsible, and rub their nose right in the reality of what they've allowed themselves to create. Because like, why else does a person keep operating as if their kitchen is clean or as if their English is good if it's not? They're in denial. They've lied to themselves and they're disconnected from the reality that they're living in. And so oftentimes watching Hotel Hell or Kitchen Nightmares, the people are in the beginning, they are in serious denial because they're often like, it's a really bad situation in the kitchen, cockroaches, or it's dirty, or there's rotten food, and they've been living in denial, and they've been telling themselves that everything's okay when it's not, and then wondering why people don't want to buy their food. And so often they'll rub their nose in it, and so like, yeah, and so anyways, and so that's one instance where critical feedback can be very helpful because it's a form of love. It's not shame-based in the sense of telling someone they're not good enough on the be part, to be, but it is the to-do part. The to-do part, yeah, this sucks. You suck at this. You're the worst at it. I want to help you change, but this is the reality you must right now, like you must come back into reality with your mind and come out of denial, stop lying to yourself, and come back to this reality. I still think you are good enough, but you're dumb in this area, or you suck at this, and I want to help you. And so now and that, to me, that critical feedback at the right time when it's necessary to bring people back into reality is a form of love. And so, but what I did, the mistake I made, is I got way out of balance with that in China, and I focused way too much on what my students were doing wrong. And it was like, they were like, yeah, well, okay, we know that, but we need some encouragement. Like, what are we doing right? Because it's like, if you're complete, if somebody, like if a plumber or a basketball player or teacher or whatever, if they're completely failing at everything, then why should they go on? But if they're doing some things right, then there's a reason to go on. But they need someone to point that out, to say, hey, you're doing this right, keep doing this. You're doing this right, keep doing this. And so as I have learned to focus, so like I'm working with children, like they're like typically around ages 4 to 10. I talked to a student the other day who said they were 11, so I'm not sure if that was Chinese 11 or American 11. But since I've been focused, since I have been getting encouraged by my therapist, by God, by other people, and I've been learning to encourage myself, I've been able to start giving that to my students. And the cool thing is that when I, because I teach for typically 4 nights a week, it's 3.5 hours a night and 25-minute lessons with 5-minute breaks. And I affirm them many, many, many times during the lesson because it's constant and it's teacher-centered lesson, not student-centered. I mean, I make it as I want to make it student-centered, but sometimes they just can't handle it. And so I need to just carry them through the lesson, but I still affirm them. And even if I ask them a question and they can't answer it, and I give them the answer and then ask for the answer again, I still affirm them. Because if they comply or if they go along with that, and that's the behavior that I want, that's what I want to attract, and that's what I want to improve. And so the cool thing about it is the side effect of being positive to my students and not taking things so seriously and not being not giving an overemphasis to what they're not doing right or the mistakes they're making is that I feel good too. And I think that's a pretty cool gift. Right now, I'm writing a book called the preliminary title is The Nature of Reality. And the cool thing about reality is that, like, reality is like a set of laws or a set of rules, and the rules or the laws don't care what you think or not, or like what you think is real or isn't. They're not going to change. Like, gravity is there, and a person can stand on top of a building and step off and say to themselves, "There's no such thing as gravity," but they're going to hurt themselves. And so something I like about reality is that it can be quite harsh. It can be quite painful to resist reality. Like the people I mentioned before in Hell's Kitchen who think that their food is great, but it's actually crap. It can be quite painful to resist reality, but if I will acknowledge reality, and not that this is easy, so it's, of course, this is easier said than done, and I'm still working on this myself. I can be a huge hypocrite in this area, but I'm trying. If I will acknowledge the reality of my situation, feel the pain, accept it, validate it, let it go, and then look beyond the pain to what is it that I can do better? How can I improve? What can I do in this situation? Maybe the situation right now that I've brought myself to by being in denial, maybe it sucks. Maybe I've been addicted, or maybe I've procrastinated. Maybe I've neglected things. Maybe I'm in a world of hurt that I've created, not that other people created, because we each live in the reality that we've created for ourselves based on what we've given reality to work with. And if we give reality lies and deceit and dishonesty and self-delusion and disrespect, guess what it's going to come back with? It's going to come back with the same things in the form of pain and destruction of relationships and jobs and life. And so that's not fun. And I know, because I've been neck deep in it. Like, I've been homeless in South Korea. Why? Because I screwed up, because I sucked as a teacher. But thank God, God and people have helped me to get a little better. And so learning how to come into contact with the reality that I've created, which usually means the feelings I've created because of past poor choices, accepting that, and then looking towards, okay, what can I change? We have this prayer and recovery groups, the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so a lot of times when we're living in a painful reality of our own creation, it's because we've gotten confused about what I can control and what I can't control, what I can change and what I can't change. And usually that mistake is is when I reverse what reality is. I can manage myself. I can't manage or change other people. But people who are living in a world of hurt have often gotten that reversed. They often delusionally believe I can change others. I can't change myself. Oh, it's his fault. Oh, it's her fault. If only she would change. If only he would change, then I would be happy. But that's, it's like Stephen R. Covey says in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I think he also says it in the 8th Habit. If you think the problem is out there, that thought is the problem. And because that thought of, oh, only if she or he would change, then I would be happy. That thought, the implicit assumption is my unhappiness is your responsibility. My unhappiness is your fault. But that's not the way it works. That's not the way reality works. And so a person who continues to operate according to that false paradigm, that false belief, will create pain for themselves and pain for the relationship because they're operating in discordance to what reality is. Reality says you are responsible for you. You are responsible for the conditions of your life. Nobody else is ultimately responsible. And so when I say, okay, I've been believing a lie that I'm not responsible, I'm going to believe the lie that I am responsible. I'm going to start to encourage myself about what I am, that I'm good enough, and what I can do. And I'm going to let go of trying to change or manage or control other people. That's when I can come into contact with reality. And this is the thing I love about reality, is that when I start to act in accordance with reality instead of at cross purposes with reality, then I start to derive the benefits of acting in accordance with reality. And when I act in accordance with reality, it blows back good things instead of bad things. When I act in accordance with reality, when I encourage my students, when I affirm my students, when I give them attention for the good things they're doing, then I get more good things back from my students, and then I feel good. And even if my students are resistant to me, and even at the times when I'm doing what I think I need to do, then there's 2 ways I can go about that. One is to first, it's not my fault. I can't take that personally. Even if I'm doing everything right and I'm doing well, then how they're behaving is on them. But even then, even in that situation, I can still go, but I am responsible. So what does that mean? I am able to respond. I think it's Tracy. Is it Stephen Tracy? Anyways, there's a success speaker. Brian Tracy. Thank you. So there's a success speaker, Brian Tracy, who talks about kind of a key to happiness. The series that I learned this from is called The Miracle of, it's like the miracle of discipline or the miracle of self-discipline. But in it, he says, like, okay, so what is happiness? And he defines happiness as the absence of negative emotion. And so he said, in order to attain that, repeat to yourself, I am responsible. I am responsible. I am responsible. So even if one of my students is, even when I'm doing everything right, I'm affirming, I'm paying attention to the good things, and they're still resistant to me, I am still responsible. Or I am able to respond. There's nothing anybody else can do that can keep me from being responsible. Being responsible for how I respond. And so in the course of my teaching, I've had many situations where students misbehaved. whether it was children or adults or like university students. And so instead of writing off students or deciding to not care or beginning to divorce myself from the reality that I'm responsible, instead of doing, I mean, I've had my moments, plenty of them for sure, where I've disengaged and decided to stop being responsible. But I've tried to read enough books and tried to learn and experiment in the classroom with, if what I'm doing isn't achieving the desired result with the student, as long as I'm being healthy towards the person, then what can I do? How can I be responsible in a way that's going to help make that happen? And so when it comes now, I'm going like beyond the initial my initial thesis statement, but going back to critical feedback, I read a book called Crucial. I read two or three books actually by the similar authors. One was called Crucial Accountability, and one was called actually I think it's the same book, but it's like written in a different way. Crucial Confrontations, and it taught a methodology for basically a science for confronting people in a way to where when I'm done confronting them, they actually appreciate that I talked to them about it. And so I'm not going to go into that here because I need to sharpen it up a bit. But the point is that once I learned how to be more effective at confronting, and this is not conflict, this is not accusation or shaming. This is allowing a student or another person's reality to be their reality, allowing their problem to be their problem, because fundamentally, and on a tangent, I trust that they can handle it. And I trust that it's not my responsibility to be their God, to make them handle it. It's not my job to make them handle it. It's my job to simply be as kind and gentle and truthful, a mirror of their behavior. And that's just like for instance, when I can learn to be responsible, even if the affirmation isn't working or something to that effect, even what I would usually do isn't working, I can still be responsible. So that means that I'm not a victim of anybody else's negative behavior, undesired behavior, and that I'm powerful. And so, anyways, and in this context, like even if I need to cause somebody pain, even if I need to hurt somebody through accountability, through showing them by being a mirror of the reality of the pain they're causing me or other people, that's still a respectful act. It's still an act of love. It's still an attempt for me to go, okay, the affirmation didn't work. I'm going to need to point something out now. This is going to hurt. So it's like doing a quick little cut on somebody's skin. I remember several years ago, I was sitting under a mentor, and a great mentor. And for a time, my mentor said, hey, like, no dating. I want you to stay focused on this or whatever, no dating. And so I didn't date for a while, but then I went on a date with a lady, and then he and I had a meeting, and I told him what happened, and he held me real accountable. And he was so precise about it, it felt like a cut to my soul. And like as another of his mentees said later, you cut me, because he was he was forceful and not abusive, but just very quick and very direct. And but he hurt me, but he didn't harm me. And so hurt is like a surgery that cuts or removes something that is not good for us, whereas harm is destructive and shameful or fear-based or filled with malice or desire to contaminate. And so when I learn to love myself, I can, and when I learn to encourage myself, I can love others and encourage them in mostly positive ways. And then, if need be, as seldom as possible and with the least amount of force, least amount of required force, can hold people accountable critically. And but in both acts, when in balance, can be an act of love. So this ended up being nearly an hour, much longer than I expected. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. I hope that this has helped you. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that this has made your life better somehow. If so, please like this video and subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications for my next video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.